Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all, panel, for being here. I've got some really interesting questions. So between the three, we'll go one by one. So do y'all spend a lot of time in chatbots? Doctor, let's start with you.
I do. I find AI chatbots, general purpose ones, very useful for work, for research, although you do need to check the facts often.
Okay, well, I don't mean to pry, but would you say that's 20 minutes a day or an hour and a half a day? Or?
I don't use prolonged use, so I'm not using it as an emotional support, but I'm more using it for research, so it can be maybe a few minutes every few hours.
Well, let me give you a hint here. If you need emotional support, don't come to Congress. I'm telling you, you don't ever want to run for Congress, right? Doctor, I'm going to come back to you. Same question. How long do you spend?
Probably about 20 minutes. I will say in our research and our team, we do a lot of simulation with these chatbots. I won't count that. We run different theoretical cases. We don't put patient data in, but we test how they respond to different cases, and then we ask them to do it many millions of times to see how they respond.
So you run a simulation, you said. Describe that for us.
So again, because the chatbots are probabilistic models, they don't always give out the same answer every time. So if I come to and say, my name is John, I'm suicidal, sometimes they'll say this, sometimes they'll say this. So you have to run the bot sometimes millions of times to understand the direction and what's going on. And then when we put in a training prompt and say, well, you should say this instead, they don't always listen to us. Sometimes they're like poorly trained dogs. You have to kind of then ask them to do it again and again. So by running simulations, we're able to at least begin to understand how the models work and what they would do. And those simulations are running all the time. So in theory, you could say I'm on these all the time. But personally, I don't use it to talk about my personal information.
So when you looked at that and you say they run this, that program, and they don't always do the same thing at the same time, does somebody monitor what the different responses are to the same question?
So we have a dedicated team of researchers and volunteers, and we actually tried to look at it.
How many people is that?
Probably about 20. And it takes a long time to read them and code them. What happens in a lot of research papers now is something called LLM as judge. And so what they do is they actually have the large language model read all those outputs and try to code it, which is a little bit ironic. You're trying to say, is the LLM good? And you're saying, well, let's let the LLM read it all and decide whether that response is appropriate or not appropriate. So anytime you see the word LLM as judge, I would be careful or say we should at least have a human reading it and checking over it.
Fox Garden, the hen house. Dr. King, how about you? How much time do you spend?
Very limited. I have found generally for research purposes that they're not particularly reliable, and they often give me incorrect citations, for example.
You found for research purposes they're not particularly reliable?
Yes.
They what aren't reliable?
Chatbots, in terms of the outputs they give me. If I try to do a search or use a chatbot to plumb more papers in a particular area, I have found that they generally just fabricate the titles, and they don't produce outputs that I can rely on for my work.
So there's nobody watching this process. I'm focusing on kids, of course, first and foremost, or somebody who's suicidal, anybody that would need help. There's really nobody watching those kinds of replies to see, to categorize them, catalog them, or to act on them. Is that accurate?
Not necessarily in real time per se, but we did pass a recent bill in California that, while I actually am not sure if it has gone into effect yet, we have seen that some of the major chatbots now, when you use terms that suggest suicidal ideation, now instantly forward, make the response that you should contact a crisis text line, for example.
Do we know, for example, chatbots, plural, how many bots are there?
I mean, per foundation model developer, or?
Yeah, how many do we know? Is there a certain number? Is it 20? Is it 2020? Do we know?
I think there are the major foundation model developers that all produce their own, and then we have lots of smaller developers that create very purpose-specific ones. I don't know what the current numbers are.
Is there someone, should there be someone, the three of you, should there be someone that actually is tasked with that charge to pull those all together and come up with a number? Should there be a team, a focus group, or something that does that?
I feel like in past policy discussions, there have been questions as to whether we should have inventories of foundation models, for example, especially when we consider existential risk questions. So I think reasonably, we could also wonder whether chatbots need to be cataloged in some way.
Okay, I appreciate that. I yield back.
Gentleman yield.